The fortress was built deep under the mountains, where no sunlight could reach and no wind could touch the stone walls. It was a place of silence, a place of shadows, and a place where secrets were buried. Inside this dark stronghold, soldiers guarded something they never spoke about. They called it a monster, but none of them dared to look at it for long. The people of the nearby villages only whispered about it. They said there was a creature locked away, chained for eternity, because if it ever walked free, the world would burn again. Elira had worked in the fortress for only 3 months. She was young, quiet, and careful. Her duty was simple: clean the prison halls, bring food, and make sure the chains were never touched. She did not question orders, because questioning in this place was dangerous. Still, every time she walked down the last corridor, her heart beat faster. At the end of that corridor was the reason this fortress even existed. Behind a gate of black steel, inside a chamber of stone, was the creature. The soldiers called it the beast. Others called it the dragon. Elira had only seen glimpses. The first time she entered, she saw a pair of eyes glowing faintly in the dark. They were not the eyes of an animal. They were intelligent, watching, waiting. Since that day, she avoided looking too long. She kept her head down, placed the food tray, and left quickly. But something about those eyes stayed with her. It was not hatred she had seen. It was not madness. It was something else. Something she could not name. One evening, after the fortress bells rang and the guards changed, Elira carried a tray of food into the chamber. The iron door groaned open, and the smell of damp stone and ashes filled her nose. She stepped carefully, her footsteps echoing. The chains clinked softly, a sound that always reminded her of a giant breathing in its sleep. In the corner, the dragon lay on the ground, its massive body covered in scars and dust. The wings were folded tightly, too large for the cell. The chains glowed faintly, strange symbols burned into the metal. Elira placed the food near the wall. She tried not to look, but her eyes betrayed her. The dragon's head lifted, and those golden eyes locked on hers. For a long moment, neither moved. She wanted to turn and run, but her feet would not listen. Then she saw something she had never noticed before. The dragon's ribs moved slowly, as if each breath was painful. Its body trembled slightly, and its claws scraped weakly against the stone. It looked less like a monster and more like a prisoner. Elira swallowed hard. No one had told her the dragon was suffering. They always spoke of it as a weapon, a danger, a curse. But here, before her, it looked almost fragile. "Eat," she whispered, though she did not know why she spoke. Her voice was small, almost afraid. The dragon did not move. Its eyes studied her, calm and silent, as if weighing her soul. She turned quickly to leave, ashamed of her own words. She reached for the door, but before her hand touched the handle, something happened. A voice slipped into her mind. It was not a sound in her ears, but a whisper deep inside her head. "Why do you care for me?" Elira froze. The tray clattered behind her, food spilling on the floor. She spun around, heart racing. The dragon had not moved, its mouth still closed, but the voice came again, soft and heavy like thunder behind clouds. "You pity me. Why?" Elira shook her head. "No, no. I did not hear that," she whispered to herself. She pressed her back against the wall, eyes wide. "You cannot speak. You are chained. You are silent." The dragon tilted its head, the faintest hint of a smile in its eyes. But it said no more. The chamber grew cold, the silence pressing against her chest. Elira's hands trembled. She pushed open the heavy door and stumbled out into the corridor. The guards outside looked at her strangely, but she said nothing. She could not. If she told them the truth, they would call her a liar, or worse, accuse her of being under the creature's spell. That night, as she lay on her small bed in the servant quarters, she stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The voice echoed again and again in her mind. "Why do you care for me?" It had not been a dream. She was certain of it. The dragon had spoken to her. But how? And why her? The fortress was full of soldiers, priests, and wardens. Why had the creature chosen her, a simple caretaker? The thought filled her with fear and curiosity. She knew she should stay away, keep her distance, and never listen. Yet deep inside, another feeling began to grow, one she could not control. She wanted to know the truth. She wanted to know what the dragon really was, and why it was locked away. In the silence of that cold night, Elira closed her eyes. She told herself she would forget, that she would not return. But in her heart, she already knew the truth. Tomorrow, when she walked into the silent prison again, she would look into those golden eyes once more. The next morning Elira woke with heavy eyes. Sleep had been broken by the whisper that would not leave her mind. She told herself she must be careful, that what she thought she heard could only bring danger. But when the time came for her duties, her feet carried her down the same dark corridors once more. The fortress was alive with noise, boots striking the stone floors and voices echoing in the halls, yet every sound seemed to fade when she approached the last gate. The guards at the door looked bored, though their hands never left their spears. One of them grinned at her nervously. "Careful in there," he said. "Don't let the beast stare at you too long. People say it can crawl inside your head." Elira forced a small smile, pretending not to care, but the words made her heart race. She pushed open the door and stepped inside the silent prison. The air was thick and heavy as always. Dust swirled through the dim light that leaked from cracks in the ceiling. The chains lay coiled around the dragon's body, glowing faintly with the strange runes carved into them. The creature lifted its head as soon as she entered. Its eyes found her again, steady and unblinking. She tried to ignore it. She set the food down carefully, avoiding any sound, and told herself she would leave quickly. But when she turned, the voice returned, sliding into her mind like a shadow. "You came back." Elira froze. She squeezed her eyes shut, whispering, "No, not again." The dragon's eyes narrowed, and though its mouth did not move, the voice was clear. "You heard me yesterday. Do not deny it." Elira's hands trembled. She wanted to run, yet she found herself asking, "Why me? Why do you speak only to me?" The dragon lowered its head until its eyes were level with her. For the first time she saw them closely, the gold burning like molten fire. "Because you listen. The others see chains. You see suffering." Elira's lips parted, but no sound came out. She thought of the bruises she had seen along its ribs, the weak way it breathed. She thought of the way it had refused to eat. Slowly, she looked back at the tray she had brought yesterday. The food was untouched, wasted. "Why don't you eat?" she asked quietly. "Because they feed me like an animal," the dragon replied. "They fear my strength, so they wish me weak. But I will not beg for their scraps." His voice was deep in her skull, heavy like a mountain pressing against her thoughts. She shivered, yet something about the words struck her heart. It was pride, not madness. Pain, not cruelty. She whispered, "But they say you killed thousands." The dragon did not blink. "Did they tell you why? Did they tell you who I fought? Or only what suited their fear?" His words unsettled her. She remembered the stories told by priests, that long ago the dragon rained fire upon villages, burning cities to ash. Yet now, hearing him, doubt began to form. Elira wanted to ask more, but the sound of boots echoed in the corridor. She flinched and stepped back quickly. The dragon's eyes dimmed, and his voice faded from her mind. "Be careful," he whispered, "they would not forgive you if they knew." The iron door opened, and a guard leaned in. "Still alive, girl," he laughed. "Don't stand too close. The beast may be weak, but if those chains break, none of us will see tomorrow." Elira forced a nod and hurried out, clutching the empty tray to her chest. She felt the guard's eyes on her until she turned the corner. That evening, she could not stop thinking about what had happened. She remembered his words, "They see chains. You see suffering." She did not want to see him that way, but she could not lie to herself. Something in her heart felt different now. The next day, she returned again. This time, she carried an extra piece of bread hidden under her apron. She told herself it was only food, nothing more, but her hands shook as she laid it down. The dragon's eyes flickered with surprise, then softened. "You risk much," he said. "Why?" Elira bit her lip. "Because you look hungry," she whispered. "Because no creature should starve like this." The dragon's voice was quieter this time, almost gentle. "You are braver than you believe, human." She turned quickly, afraid of what she had done, and left before the guards could notice. Yet that night, as she lay in bed, a strange warmth filled her chest. She was no longer only a servant obeying orders. She was part of something hidden, something dangerous. And though fear gripped her heart, curiosity grew stronger. Day after day, she began to linger a little longer in the prison. Sometimes she asked questions. Sometimes the dragon answered. He spoke of skies filled with fire, of battles fought not against humans but against invaders from the stars. He told her how he had once defended this world, only to be chained by the very people he had saved. His words painted pictures in her mind, so different from the stories she had always been told. Yet doubt remained. Was this truth, or only lies meant to trick her? Elira could not be certain. Still, every time she looked into those golden eyes, she felt less like she was staring at a monster, and more like she was staring at a prisoner who had waited a long, long time for someone to listen. The days passed slowly inside the fortress, but for Elira they no longer felt the same. Each morning she carried food into the silent prison, and each evening she left with questions swirling in her mind. The dragon no longer felt like a shadow or a beast. It felt like a voice, steady and patient, waiting for her to listen. At first she told herself she should stop, that one mistake could cost her life, but curiosity was stronger than fear. Every time she heard his voice in her head, she felt pulled deeper into a story hidden beneath the walls of stone. One night, while the torches burned low and the fortress echoed with distant shouts, Elira slipped into the chamber again. The guards barely noticed her anymore. They were used to seeing her pass, carrying trays, sweeping dust, cleaning corners. No one cared about a servant girl. She closed the heavy door behind her, heart racing. Inside the cell, the dragon stirred. His golden eyes glowed faintly in the dark. The chains shimmered as he moved, their runes humming with power. For a long moment he watched her, silent, and then his voice filled her mind. You should not come so often. If they see your eyes, they will know. Elira frowned. My eyes? Yes, he replied. You carry questions now. Curiosity shines brighter than fear, and fear is what keeps them blind. She hesitated, then whispered, if you want me to stay away, then stop speaking. Stop making me wonder who you are. The dragon's gaze softened, and for the first time, his voice carried something like sorrow. You want truth. I will give you truth. But truth is a dangerous gift. He lowered his head closer to her, his breath warm against the cold air. Long before this fortress was built, long before your people feared me, I fought not against humans but against the darkness that fell from the sky. Creatures came from beyond the stars, tearing the earth, burning villages, stealing lives. I rose to fight them, not because I was commanded, but because this world was also my home. I fought for the humans, though they never understood me. Elira listened in silence, her hands trembling. He continued. I was not alone. There were others of my kind, dragons who ruled the skies. Together we burned the invaders back into the void. But fear is a poison, and humans are quick to drink it. They saw our fire and our strength, and instead of trust, they felt terror. They said, if dragons can destroy our enemies, then they can also destroy us. And so they betrayed us. One by one my kin were hunted, trapped, and killed. I am the last they captured alive. This prison is their victory, their proof that they can chain even what once saved them. His words struck deep inside her. She wanted to deny them, but her mouth refused to move. The stories she had grown up with echoed in her head, tales told by priests of a great beast who rained destruction upon the land, who demanded worship and blood. But looking at him now, listening to his voice, those tales felt twisted, half-told, shaped by fear. Elira whispered, if what you say is true, why do you not break free? You are strong. Stronger than chains. The dragon's eyes burned like fire in the dark. These are no ordinary chains. They are forged from human fear and sealed with lies. As long as they believe I am a monster, as long as they tell the story of the beast in the dark, these bonds will hold. Elira felt a chill run down her spine. She reached out without thinking, her hand trembling as it touched the cold iron links. They pulsed faintly, almost alive, humming under her skin. She pulled back quickly, heart pounding. Then you are trapped not by metal, but by their hatred, she whispered. The dragon nodded slowly. You understand. That night, Elira left the chamber shaken. She could not stop thinking of what he had said. If it was true, then everything she had been taught was a lie. If it was false, then she was falling into a trap set by a clever creature. Both paths were dangerous. Yet when she closed her eyes, she did not see a monster. She saw a prisoner, alone in the dark, holding secrets no one else would believe. The next evening she returned again. This time she carried not only food but also a question she had been afraid to ask. When the chamber door closed, she stepped closer to the chains and whispered, "What is your name?" The dragon was silent for a long time. Then his voice rumbled in her mind, heavy and old. "Names have power. My true name was taken from me when they bound me here. But once, before the chains, humans called me Caliph, the guardian flame." The sound of it filled her heart with warmth and dread. A name made him real, more than just a beast in the dark. She repeated it softly, "Caliph." His eyes glowed brighter. "Yes. And now you carry it. Do not let them take it from you." Elira swallowed hard. The walls of the fortress suddenly felt smaller, heavier, as though listening to her thoughts. She knew she was in danger. She knew the longer she spoke with him, the more she risked her life. Yet as she walked away that night, one truth was clear in her heart. The world outside called him a monster, but inside the silent prison she had begun to hear another story, the whispers of the past that no one else dared to believe. Days turned into weeks, and Elira's steps toward the silent prison grew heavier but also more certain. Every visit deepened the bond she tried to deny. The dragon, Caliph, was no longer just a chained creature in her eyes. He was a voice of knowledge, a reminder that everything she had been told might be a lie. Still, fear never left her. Fear of the guards, fear of discovery, and fear of one question that had begun to burn inside her chest. That question haunted her each night and followed her into her dreams. If Caliph truly had the power of flame, if he was once a guardian, why did he remain chained like a helpless prisoner? Why not break free? On one quiet evening, the fortress was hushed except for the clatter of distant patrols. Elira carried the food tray down the corridor, her heart beating faster with every step. She pushed open the heavy iron door and slipped inside. The dragon lifted his head, eyes gleaming like molten gold in the darkness. His voice filled her mind before she could speak. "You carry a storm within you tonight. What troubles you, Elira?" She placed the tray on the ground, hesitated, then finally whispered, "If you are so powerful, if you once fought against the darkness of the sky, then why do you sit here, silent and chained? Why do you not rise? Why do you not fight again?" The question escaped her lips before she could stop it. For a moment Caliph did not answer. His eyes narrowed, and the runes on the chains flickered as though stirred by his thoughts. When his voice came, it was slower, heavier than before. "That is the forbidden question, the one even I asked myself for years. These chains are not only iron. They are belief. They are forged from human fear, sealed by their stories, strengthened each time they call me a monster. Power is not only fire and claw. Power is what the world believes you are. As long as fear rules their hearts, I am bound." Elira shivered, staring at the glowing symbols etched into the metal. They pulsed faintly, alive with energy. She reached out as if to touch them, then pulled back quickly. "Then, you mean the chains exist because people believe in them?" "Yes," the dragon said, his voice like distant thunder. "Every whisper of my cruelty, every tale of my wrath feeds these bonds. They do not see a guardian. They see a beast. And so the chains remain." Elira sank to her knees, her mind spinning. All her life she had heard priests and soldiers speak of Caliph with terror. They described him as fire without mercy, as death given wings. If those lies were the source of his prison, then the truth could set him free. But who would believe her? She was just a servant girl, nothing more. She looked up again. "If you could break free," she asked softly, "what would you do? Would you burn them as they fear, or would you protect them as you claim?" Caliph's gaze did not waver. "I do not promise peace. I do not promise mercy. But I do not crave their destruction. I crave freedom. I crave the sky. What I do after depends not on them, but on whether they learn to see me as more than a weapon or a curse." His words cut deep into her heart. For the first time, she realized that even if he was innocent of the crimes they spoke of, freedom itself could still be dangerous. A free dragon, wronged and hunted, could decide to take revenge. And she would be the one who had helped him. Before she could reply, the ground trembled slightly. Dust fell from the ceiling of the chamber. The dragon lifted his head sharply, nostrils flaring. His golden eyes blazed brighter. "Do you feel that?" Elira stood, confused. "The ground." "Not the ground," Caliph whispered, his voice laced with warning. "The sky. They are coming." Her blood ran cold. "Who is coming?" The dragon's wings shifted against the chains, their tips scraping stone. "The same darkness I fought long ago. The raiders from beyond the stars. They circle again. They have found this fortress." Elira's heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to deny it, but the tremors grew stronger. Distant shouts echoed through the corridors outside. The sound of alarm bells soon followed, sharp and urgent. Soldiers ran past the hall, their voices filled with panic. Elira pressed her hand against the heavy iron door, listening. The fortress was under attack. Calitha's voice filled her mind again, calm but fierce. "You see now why I spoke to you. Chains may hold me, but they will not hold them. If they come for me, the humans will not survive. If you want to live, Elira, remember your question. Will you let fear decide, or will you set me free?" Her breath caught in her throat. She stared at the glowing runes on the chains, then at the door where chaos screamed beyond. Her forbidden question had led to a forbidden answer, one that now demanded a choice. She turned back to the dragon. His golden eyes burned into hers, filled not with hatred, but with something far more dangerous. Hope. The fortress shook with the force of distant impacts, stones trembling as if the mountain itself had begun to shiver. The alarm screamed through the halls, bells ringing again and again, soldiers shouting orders that tangled into chaos. Elira pressed herself against the door of the silent prison, heart pounding in her chest. She had never heard such terror in the voices of trained warriors. Through the thick walls she caught faint echoes, not of human cries, but of something else, strange shrieks, metallic roars, the sound of claws scraping against steel. The raiders Caliph spoke of had come, and they were inside the fortress. She turned back to the chained dragon. His golden eyes burned like twin fires in the shadows, his body tense, wings straining against the glowing shackles. Dust fell around him as the ceiling quivered. His voice filled her mind again, sharper than ever. "The sky beasts are here. They come not for you, not for the soldiers. They come for me. They fear my return as much as your people do. If they succeed, both your kind and mine will vanish together." Elira shook her head in disbelief. "The soldiers will fight them. They will protect us." Calitha's eyes narrowed, his voice heavy with bitter certainty. "They cannot fight what they do not understand. Their weapons are nothing against the raiders. I have fought them before. I know their hunger. They will tear through your walls as if they are paper. Already they are inside." As if to prove his words, a thunderous crash rang through the fortress. Screams erupted, followed by the clash of steel and the sound of gunfire. The ground shook again. Elira's legs trembled. She wanted to run, to hide, but her feet carried her closer to the dragon instead. "If I free you," she whispered, her voice breaking, "will you protect me?" His gaze did not waver. "I will protect you. I cannot promise the others. But you who gave me food, you who gave me a voice, I will not let you fall while I still breathe." Her heart twisted with fear and doubt. She thought of the priests who had warned her since childhood, of the guards who had told her never to look too closely at the beast. She thought of the punishments for betrayal, of the danger of trusting a creature her people called cursed. But then she thought of the truth Caliph had shown her, of the sorrow in his voice, of the chains that glowed with the weight of lies. Outside, a door slammed and the cries of soldiers grew louder. She heard a man shout, then a scream cut short. Elira's hands shook as she looked down at the chain's lock. The key hung on the wall, heavy and black, untouched for years. Her fingers hovered near it, her breath shallow. Behind her, the dragon's voice thundered in her mind, fierce and urgent. "Choose, Elira. Chains or fire. Death or life. You hold the moment in your hands." Her hand closed around the key. For an instant she froze, every thought in her mind screaming at her to stop. But when the next crash shook the ground and she heard the inhuman screeches growing closer, her fear tipped into desperation. She tore the key from the wall and turned to the chains. The metal links burned with faint light, runes shifting like embers. She jammed the key into the first lock. It resisted, groaning, as if the fortress itself fought against her choice. With a cry she twisted harder, and with a crack like lightning, the lock broke open. The rune on that chain flickered and died. Caliph let out a sound, a deep growl that rattled the air. His wings stretched slightly, the first taste of freedom in countless years. Elira fumbled with the second lock, tears blurring her vision. Another scream echoed outside the chamber, this one closer, filled with terror. She turned the key, forced it past the rust, and another chain fell away. The dragon's breath came louder now, hot and sharp, his chest rising with power. When she freed the last lock, the chains collapsed to the floor with a crash that rang through the cell like a bell of doom. Caliph rose slowly, shaking off the weight of centuries. His wings spread wide, scraping the stone walls, sending dust cascading down. His golden eyes blazed brighter than fire, his voice roaring both in her mind and aloud for the first time. I am free. The ground shook violently as another explosion ripped through the fortress. The heavy door burst open and a soldier stumbled inside, his armor torn, blood streaking his face. Behind him came a creature unlike anything Elira had ever seen. Its body was thin and sharp like blades, its skin glistened like metal, and its eyes glowed with a cruel blue light. It screeched, lunging at the soldier with claws that ripped through steel as if it were cloth. Elira screamed, but before the creature could strike again, Caliph moved. With a single sweep of his tail, he smashed the raider against the wall, crushing it into twisted fragments. Fire rose from his throat, flooding the chamber with light. The soldier fell to his knees, staring in shock at the dragon that now towered above them. Caliph spread his wings fully, his scales burning with power, his voice shaking the fortress. No more chains. No more silence. Tonight the fire wakes again. Elira stood frozen, the key still in her trembling hand. She knew the fortress would never be the same, that nothing in her life would ever return to what it had been. But as Caliph roared and the fortress shook, one truth burned in her chest. She had made her choice. The fortress had never known such chaos. Smoke poured through the halls, the clash of steel against alien claws echoed like thunder, and the air stank of blood and fire. Soldiers shouted orders, but their voices broke under the screams of the dying. The walls that had stood for centuries now shook with every impact, cracks spreading like veins across the stone. In the heart of this ruin stood Caliph, his wings spread wide, his scales glowing with the heat of ancient fire. The chains that once bound him lay shattered on the ground, their runes dark and lifeless. His roar filled the chamber, rolling through the fortress like a storm. Elira covered her ears, yet even through the deafening sound, her heart leapt with something she had never felt before, hope mixed with terror. The soldier who had stumbled into the chamber crawled backward, his eyes wide with fear. He had just seen a monster freed, yet that same monster had saved his life. Caliph turned his gaze upon him, golden eyes burning like suns. For a moment the soldier seemed ready to raise his blade, but then the dragon spoke, his voice deep and shaking the very stones. If you strike me, you die. If you stand aside, you live. Choose wisely. The soldier's weapon clattered to the ground, his courage broken. He fled into the chaos outside, leaving Elira and Caliph alone. The dragon lowered his head toward her, his breath hot, his eyes fierce but steady. You did not hesitate at the end, he said. You freed me. You chose fire. Elira trembled, gripping the key still in her hand. I had no choice, she whispered. Calitha's gaze softened slightly. There is always a choice. And you chose to believe. Before she could answer, the sound of screeches filled the corridor outside. More of the alien raiders came, their bodies sharp and twisted, their glowing eyes fixed on the chamber. They poured in, moving with unnatural speed, their claws tearing into the walls as they charged. Elira stumbled back in fear, but Calitha's wings snapped open, filling the chamber with shadow and light. With a deep breath, fire erupted from his throat, a river of flame so bright it blinded her eyes. The creatures shrieked, their metal-like bodies melting under the heat. The fire roared through the corridor, turning the invaders to ash. The fortress itself groaned, stones cracking under the force of Calitha's power. When the blaze ended, the hall was silent except for the crackle of burning corpses. Elira gasped for breath, her face warm from the heat. She stared at him in awe. You really were telling the truth, she whispered. Caliph lifted his head proudly, his wings folding slightly. Truth is not always believed, but it burns brighter than lies. He turned toward the ruined doorway, his voice echoing. Come, Elira. This fortress will not stand. If you stay, you die. Elira hesitated, fear clashing with instinct. To follow him meant betrayal of her people, but to stay meant certain death. She looked around at the burning stone, at the shadows of more creatures lurking deeper in the fortress, and her choice became clear. She ran to his side. Together they moved through the broken halls. Soldiers stopped and stared, some lifting their weapons in terror. One cried out, "The beast is free." Another shouted, "Kill it before it destroys us all." Arrows flew, spears clattered, but Calith's wings rose like a shield, fire spilling from his jaws to drive the invaders back. Some soldiers turned their weapons on him, but others fell to their knees, unable to decide if he was foe or savior. Elira shouted at them with all the strength in her voice. "He is not your enemy. He is saving us." But her words were drowned in the roar of battle. The alien raiders swarmed through the cracks in the walls, their screeches piercing the air. Caliph leapt forward, his claws crushing stone and steel alike. His fire carved through the darkness, scattering the creatures like insects before a torch. Elira followed closely, clinging to his scales when the ground shook too hard to stand. Everywhere they went, she saw the truth. Caliph was not destroying the fortress, the invaders were. And without him, no one would survive. At last they reached the great courtyard where the sky could be seen. The night was alive with fire. Strange ships hovered above, their shapes jagged and unnatural, beams of light cutting into the mountain. Soldiers fired arrows and cannons, but the weapons barely scratched the invaders' hulls. Caliph looked up, his wings trembling with the need to fly. "This is what I was born for," he rumbled. To face them once again. Elira's heart pounded as she realized what he intended. "But, your chains. Are you strong enough?" His eyes blazed brighter than ever. "Freedom has given me back what they took. Watch, and remember." With a roar that shook the heavens, Caliph leapt into the sky. His wings beat against the air, sending gusts strong enough to knock soldiers from their feet. Fire poured from his throat, striking the alien ships, forcing them to scatter. For the first time in centuries, the guardian flame soared above the world once more. Elira stood in the courtyard, staring upward with tears in her eyes. Around her, soldiers gaped in shock. Some shouted that the end of the world had come, while others cheered desperately, clinging to any hope of survival. Above them, dragon and invader clashed in fire and steel. Freedom had awoken, and nothing would ever be the same again. The night sky burned with fire as Caliph soared above the fortress, his flames carving bright trails against the dark. The alien ships shifted in panic, beams of light blasting down, but none could pierce his wings. With each roar he struck, with each sweep of his claws, the raiders scattered like ash on the wind. Below, the soldiers and servants of the fortress stared in awe and terror. Some shouted prayers, others fell to their knees. They had grown up hearing stories of a beast who would end the world, yet here before their eyes, the same beast was their shield against destruction. Elira stood among them, her face lit by fire and shadow. Her heart raced with fear, but also with pride. She had freed him, and now he fought not only for himself but for her, for all of them. The ground shook as another ship fell from the sky, crashing into the mountainside with an explosion that lit the horizon. Cheers rose from some soldiers, but others shouted warnings, "Do not trust it. When the battle ends, it will turn on us." Elira's stomach twisted at their words. Could they be right? Caliph had promised to protect her, but he had also said he did not promise peace to all humans. She remembered the sorrow in his voice when he spoke of betrayal, of the death of his kin. What if once the sky was clear, his anger turned upon those who had caged him? Her hands trembled as she clutched the broken key that still hung from her belt. The roar of battle filled the air. More raiders poured from the ships, their claws tearing through stone, their shrieks echoing across the mountain. Caliph landed in the courtyard again, his wings folding around Elira to shield her from a wave of fire and debris. His golden eyes met hers, fierce yet calm. "You see now," he rumbled. "Without me, your world would already be ash. Do you still think me your enemy?" Elira's throat tightened. "No, but they do," she whispered, glancing at the soldiers raising their weapons in fear. Caliph turned his head toward them, and for a heartbeat she thought he might unleash his fire. Instead, he only spread his wings, towering over them. "Their fear is their choice. Yours is the one that matters." His words struck her deeper than any blade. The battle raged on, but in that moment Elira understood. This was not only a fight for survival, it was a test of what she would decide. Would she return to her people with the same lies they had always told, calling him a beast, condemning him to chains once more? Or would she stand against them, carrying the truth of who he was, even if it meant being branded a traitor? She looked up at the sky where the last alien ship circled, Caliph leaping toward it with a roar that split the heavens. Fire engulfed the enemy vessel, and with one final strike of his claws, the ship burst apart, raining metal across the mountainside. Silence followed, broken only by the crackle of flames. The raiders were gone. The fortress lay in ruins, its walls shattered, its soldiers scattered, but the threat from the stars had been driven away. Caliph landed heavily in the courtyard, his chest rising and falling, smoke curling from his jaws. He stood tall and unbroken, the last of his kind, free at last. The soldiers gathered in fear and awe. Some dropped their weapons, whispering that the guardian flame had saved them. Others shouted for chains, demanding he be bound before he turned on them. The commander stepped forward, his voice shaking but firm. "That creature is dangerous. It killed as many as it saved. We cannot let it walk free." Elira stood between him and the dragon, her heart pounding. All eyes turned to her, the servant girl no one had noticed before, the one who now stood in the center of history. Calitha's gaze found hers again. "Now, Elira, the choice is yours. Will you tell them who I am? Or will you let them bind me again? One path will cage me forever. The other will change your world." The courtyard fell silent. The flames crackled, the night wind carried the scent of smoke, and every soldier waited for her words. Elira's lips parted, but no sound came. She looked at the faces of her people, some filled with hate, some with doubt, some with hope. She looked at Caliph, his scales still glowing faintly, his golden eyes burning not with cruelty, but with the weight of centuries of betrayal. The silence stretched on, heavy as stone. Finally, she drew a breath. She knew that whatever she said now would decide not only her fate, but the fate of her people, perhaps even the fate of the world. She whispered, "He is not what you think." Her voice trembled, but it carried across the courtyard. "He is not our enemy." Gasps rose from the crowd. The commander's eyes widened in anger. Some soldiers shouted in protest, others in confusion. Caliph watched her quietly, as though testing if she would falter. She stood straighter, her voice louder. "He saved us. Without him, we would all be dead. You can choose to fear him, but I will not. I choose to believe." The courtyard erupted in chaos. Some soldiers lowered their weapons, some raised them higher. The commander shouted orders, but his words were drowned in the storm of voices. Caliph spread his wings, the wind from them knocking dust into the air. His voice thundered in their minds. "Your world has chosen fear for too long. Now it must choose truth. I will not force it. I will only live free." He looked down at Elira, his eyes softer now. "You have given me freedom. Now I give you choice." With a final roar, he leapt into the sky, soaring into the smoke-filled night, his massive form vanishing into the clouds. Elira stood frozen, her people staring at her in disbelief. The fortress was broken, the night still heavy with fire, but in her heart she knew the world had changed. Whether they called her traitor or prophet, she had chosen her truth. And somewhere in the sky above, the last dragon was free.